Donald Trump wins the presidency.
Simpsons did it.
The blockbuster Disney deal, the parent company of ABC buying many of the assets of 21st Century Fox.
Simpsons did it.
The World Health Organization has just declared it is a pandemic at this point.
Simpsons did it.
Dubbed the murder hornet for its powerful sting and the way it decapitates its prey, Simpsons did it.
Ah, yes, The Simpsons. 30 years of TV comedy, 10 of which were actually funny. But can it actually predict the future? Well, according to one site, it can. Ah, yes, BuzzFeed. 30 gajillion terabytes of information fed to you daily, only 10 megabytes of which are actually useful. But I just can't pick on them. It turns out there's an army of websites ready to declare The Simpsons the yellow-skinned Nostradamuses of our time. But is this true? Do the writers have some sort of uncanny sixth sense? Can they peer through their endless piles of empty Red Bull cans and divine the future through their thick-rimmed glasses by reading the clippings off their hipster beards as if they were Chinese tea leaves? Can writers, the unappreciated backbones of Hollywood, conjure the clairvoyance of Muad'Dib, Rasputin, and that one guy from Ghostbusters who totally got the wavy lines before Peter Venkman zapped him? The answer is no. What kind of stupid question is that? Oh, you're still here. I guess you wanted some actual information. Well, if Simpsons can predict the future, then what is going on? The answer is simple: satire. Now, satire is defined as the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics or other topical issues. See, Simpsons isn't predicting the future, it's mocking the present. In that respect, it shares something similar with another popular show, South Park. Now, South Park tackles its subjects a little differently. They often dive headfirst into parody. Now, parody is an imitation of the style of a particular writer, artist, or genre with deliberate exaggeration for comic effect. And yes, The Simpsons do occasionally dive into parody themselves, especially in their later years. But The Simpsons uses parody more like a seasoning, whereas with South Park, it's more like their bread and butter. Is there anything wrong with this? No. In fact, parody can be used by satirists to drive home their point. For example, the South Park episode Trapper Keeper contained parodies of both Terminator and Akira, while also spinning a yarn about the 2000 presidential election. So the parody serves the satire. One of the reasons I think South Park does this is, well, because they can. See, South Park and The Simpsons both take on current events, but only one has the faster turnaround time. Because of South Park's cheap budget and speedy production process, they can comment on just about anything a mere week or two after it happens, and it can get as outlandish as you want. Not so with The Simpsons. No, they're more grounded. And they've got armies of writers and underpaid animators and endless celebrity cameos and voice actor negotiations and blah blah blah. The result is it takes The Simpsons about 6 months to make an episode. South Park? 5 days if you're rushing it. So if both are reactionary satires, why doesn't South Park have the same reputation for fortune-telling? Well, South Park doesn't follow the golden rule of all fake psychics. When in doubt, be vague. Because The Simpsons takes so long to make, it has to paint with much broader strokes. South Park, on the other hand, can get into the nitty-gritty of everyday news. It's the difference between watching something like West Wing, House of Cards, or Veep, and contrasting that with The Daily Show or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. As TV programs, South Park, like The Daily Show, will always feel fresher because it's perpetually in the zeitgeist. But its individual episodes are not going to have the same kind of staying power or spooky intuition like a bigger production will, for the very reason that those more expensive shows have to think in more generic terms. And this is what happened with The Simpsons. It takes the macro approach, where South Park takes the micro. This is how you get the occasional lucky guess. Not because it's speculative. There's nothing that speculative or prophetic about The Simpsons. You can go to Twilight Zone, Futurama, Star Trek, or Black Mirror for that sort of thing. No, it's because they knew how to pick and choose their targets in the here and now. Or I guess, then now.
We're at now.
And comment on them in such an open-ended way that it looks to us, years later, like prophecy. But the reality is, it wasn't prophecy. It was just shit that was happening.
All right, Mr. Fancy Pants, well, prove it.
Well, my pants aren't fancy, they're jeans, and they're covered in paint, because there's a plague outside and I'm working from home and don't care anymore. But you want to throw down?
All right, longer. Let's do it.
So let's take 3 examples I've seen in clickbait articles and try to figure out just where these mystical premonitions came from. First, Season 11, Episode 17, Bart vs. the Future. Ah yes, The Simpsons predicted the rise of the Angry Orange himself, Donald Trump, a good 15 years before those red MAGA hats started popping up in rallies as if God spilled a giant bottle of Tylenol. And what's more, it also predicted a Hillary-Trump matchup in the guise of one Lisa Simpson, who's elected after Trump botched things up.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
Now, I'm not going to talk about my personal views about the Don. My swear jar is so full I could dive into it like Scrooge McDuck, thank you very much. No, we're not here for politics, we're just here to answer a simple question. Did The Simpsons really predict the future? And the answer is, not really, or if they did, it was kind of incidental. Now, this may seem crazy to some of you. After all, this is one of the few legit speculative episodes Simpsons ever aired. And it had a Trump in the White House and a Hillary lookalike. Who would predict such a thing in the year 2000? Well, you could ask the writer Dan Groening. He said it was intended as, quote, a warning to America. Wow, how pretentiously portentous. But portentously pretentiousness aside, how would one even arrive at this conclusion? Well, let me take you back to the year 2000. I remember it well because it was the first presidential election where I could actually vote.
Look, I'm so old to young eyes.
We kind of forget in our post-2016 world that Donald Trump is not a new phenomenon. In 1988, he considered running as a Republican. In 2000, I clearly remember him campaigning for the Reform Party nomination. Hell, he said Oprah Winfrey would be his ideal running mate. Imagine that. No, go ahead, try. I dare you. Anyway, it was Jesse Ventura, Minnesota's wrestler governor, yes, that was a thing, who convinced him to do it. So yeah, he was in the news. And that news, well, looked a little nuts at the time. Getting back to Dan Groening, he said, that just seemed like the logical last stop before hitting rock bottom. It was pitched because it was consistent with the vision of America going insane. Now this kind of smacks as hindsight being 20/20 to me. Personally, I feel like this was a throwaway joke and not some dark portent of things to come. But hey, Dan did his homework and did what any good satirist does, commented on the crazy going on around him. I don't begrudge him milking his keen eye, but look at the timeline here. In October of 1999, Trump announced he was forming an exploratory committee. Now, Bart vs. the Future ran in March of 2000. Remember how The Simpsons takes about 6 months to produce an episode? Do the math. As for Lisa being a stand-in for Hillary Clinton, well, who else would it be? By the year 2000, Lisa had already been the show's card-carrying, finger-waving social justice warrior in a world where we didn't even have a definition for that yet. This just seems like a logical next step given her history. That she seems loosely modeled on Hillary should also come as no surprise. Remember, at this stage of the show's history, Lisa would have been a straight-up 90s girl. It may seem strange in 2020, where we've got no shortage of female candidates, but in the 90s, Hillary was kind of the only game in town. Sure, you had women making headroads like Madeleine Albright, Janet Reno, Oprah Winfrey, and others, but only one was really toying with a presidential run as much as, well, this guy. So yeah, this was literally a running meme before memes were even really a thing. Hillary wanted to be president. The media knew it. She ran for Senate in the same year this episode ran. Comedians were cracking jokes about it. Pluto Nash made a joke about it. It's not that complicated. Moving on, let's talk about Season 10, Episode 5, When You Dish Upon a Star. In it, Ron Howard and Brian Grazer produce a script Homer pitches. The script is being produced at 20th Century Fox, where a sign in front of the studio's headquarters reveals... Oh my God.
Witchcraft.
That's right, the Simpsons predicted the Disney-Fox merger. But how? How could they see this coming in 1998? What sort of twisted palantir were these Simpsons scribing Sarumans using? Well, let's travel back in time again to my teen years, the 1990s.
Wasn't that the period when they cracked the human genome and boy bands roamed the earth?
Yes, it was, Dr. Farnsworth. And you know what else roamed the earth? Disney. Lots and lots of Disney. Yes, we think it's crazy now just how much of the earth Mickey rules under his cheese-stained gloves of death. But in the 90s, many of us were thinking the same thing people are now. Just how big is this company gonna get, anyway? We sometimes forget that the backlash against Disney actually started at the height of the Disney Renaissance. Every year back then, I remember reading a new article about Disney suing a daycare center for copyright, or writing sex in The Lion King, or doing something to make some sort of religious Karen all angry. And that's not even taking into account all the acquisitions and expansions under the dark reign of Lord Eisner. I mean, look at this list. 1984, Touchstone Pictures is created. 1986, Pixar. 1992, Euro Disney. 1993, Miramax Films. 1996, the ABC Network, and with it, ESPN, A&E, Lifetime Channel, Deke Productions, and a major publishing firm. 1998, Disney buys Starwave to solidify their online presence. Now let's add all of the films, direct-to-DVD sequels, and Disney Channel material that exploded in the 90s. And all of this, amazingly, after bottoming out in 1985, when the Black Cauldron got trounced by the frickin' Care Bears movie. Trust me, in the 90s, we were all thinking the same thing.
Company's a monster.
Would they get bigger? Sure. Would they buy Fox? Absolutely. But was this predicting the future? Not at all. It was a commentary on what they were seeing happening right in front of their eyes. Check out this headline from the Washington Post, 1997. Big mergers get bigger in the 90s. Even Simpsons writer Al Jean said, quote, "It was just an idea for the type of deal that could occur. It happens. There's always mergers. It seemed logical, you know?" The Simpsons called it merely because it was happening in real time. The writers were observant. Heck, just 3 years after this episode aired, Disney bought Fox Family. Well, that's all good and fine, you're saying, but what about the big one, the coup de Gracie, the 1-2 punch that proves The Simpsons is the dime store Christopher Walken from Dead Zone we need? Feast your eyes on Season 4, Episode 21, Marge in Chains.
The dreaded Osaka flu has hit Springfield with over 300 cases now reported.
We need a cure! We need a cure!
Wow. Now that's,
really creepy.
I mean, look at this. We have a plague. It came from Asia. The populace is incapacitated by it. They're begging for a vaccine. Then, in the middle of all this social unrest, killer insects attack. When you look at what's going on right now in 2020, with all our infectious diseases and gangs of murder hornets, it's easy to start drawing connections. And I think we all know what those connections point to.
It's a conspiracy.
Or maybe there's a completely logical explanation.
Boo!
Let's go back to the Jurassic Age, 1993. While T-Rexes were roaming the multiplexes, for the first time, the episode Marge in Chains was premiering in May of that year. Why is that date important? Because in 1992, a World Health Organization scientist in Beijing identified a strain of human influenza virus never seen before. Within days, it was duly noted by international health bodies and dubbed the Type A Beijing flu. To no one's surprise, the Beijing flu soon began showing up in the United States and became an epidemic. Not the worst epidemic ever, but enough of an epidemic that I remember hearing about it that year. And wouldn't you know it, there was all sorts of hang-ups about flu vaccines then as well. Gee, I wonder where the Simpsons got their Osaka flu idea from. Okay, but what about the Murder Hornets connection? I mean, that's pretty coincidental, isn't it? Well, funny thing about that, killer bees were actually in the zeitgeist back in the 80s and early 90s. I know, because I was there.
I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3,000 years ago.
Killer bees first showed up in California back in 1985, and I distinctly remember my 6-year-old brain being terrified of these things. There were reports that these striped bastards were gonna make their way up the continent, slowly advancing every year until we all ended up like Macaulay Culkin in My Girl. Really, if you lived in the American South back in the 80s like I did, this was an actual topic of discussion, especially for school kids who let their imaginations run wild. Fortunately, I'm a grown adult now, and only have to worry about literally every single other thing the year 2020 is trying to throw at me. But killer bees? No? Not so much. But in 1992, they were still in the news because they had crossed the border into Texas right around 1990. So yeah, it's not too hard to see what happened here. They needed a throwaway joke to top their bit off, and hey, killer bees were still kind of a thing. And there you have it, and I want to make something very clear. None of this is to cheapen what The Simpsons has given us. That people want to make these connections 30 to 20 years after the facts speaks to the quality of the show's writing. And it's no coincidence that most of the examples people cite come from the show's heyday, the first 10 seasons. Yes, the quality of the writing dropped like a live hand grenade after that, and the show is a shell of what it once was, but its power still holds up. And that's the thing. It's not that The Simpsons could predict history. It's just that, well, history simply repeated itself. Sadly, there will always be political grifters, shady corporate mergers, deadly epidemics, and invasions of foreign species. And we seem to be no more prepared for it now than we were decades ago. What The Simpsons did was expose all that, because that's what good satire does. It looks at the world around us and mocks that social insanity. And hey, it's all good. Honestly, it's kind of amusing to look at a bunch of clickbait articles written by 20-somethings who like to ascribe mystical powers to what is simply good writing. Sometimes it reminds us just how little some things have changed, and other times it's just reaching for straws. Hey, did you know The Simpsons predicted the smartwatch? Yeah, sure. Okay, Dick Tracy and Inspector Gadget would like to have a word with you. So for younger fans, this might be illuminating. Now you've got the other side of the story. And for older fans, we can all have a chuckle, because we might remember just what the origins of these jokes were in the first place. With age, you might not get wisdom, but you get plenty of experience. In this case, lousy experience, repeated twice. But to say the writers had spooky powers, that does them a disservice. Sure, maybe some of these writers would get a kick out of that, but the reality is they were just great writers, pointing out what should be the bleedin' obvious, but so often isn't because of our societal blinders. That's why, even if their glory days are long gone, there's something lasting about these episodes. The Daily Show and South Park may live perpetually in the now, but it also runs the risk of becoming instantly dated. And that's okay. I love those shows. But by painting with a broader brush, the best Simpsons episodes achieve something else entirely. They feel a little more, well, timeless. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Either way, leave a comment, and make sure to check out our podcast. Until next time, smell you later!
I can't believe smell you later replaced goodbye.
Now there's a prediction that didn't come true. Where were you on that one, Simpsons?